Towards the end of Surah An-Nūr, there's a verse that mentions a very specific etiquette, all right? It mentions not just the rules of visitation, meaning strangers coming to you, but it mentions how you should teach your children when they're, for certain times of the day, at certain times of the day, to knock on your bedroom door before just walking in, all right? So just a very nice mannerism, something good to teach the children. Then one of the scholars, who was from the time, a little before the time of Imam Abu Hanifa, just to give you a sense here, he was asked, he said, they asked him, has this verse been abrogated? Meaning we don't have to act upon this verse anymore? So he was surprised. He said, no, it hasn't been. So the man said, because people never act upon it anymore. And he said, may Allah have mercy on them. All right, what am I saying here? This question was over 1,200 years ago when this scholar was asked, and he was told, people don't act upon this verse anymore. Look how early on people abandoned this sunnah. All right? So that means if you actually learn this and go teach it to your children today, you will be amongst a very few on the planet that's actually carrying out this verse. And you know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that mentions that every verse of the Quran comes and either testifies for you or against you on the Day of Judgment. Ya Allah, he acted upon me. Ya Allah, he didn't act upon me. How many people would have not acted upon this verse in Surah An-Nur? I'll give you another interesting story in Surah An-Nur. One of the early Muslims, when he saw the verses, so in Islam, you have more of a right to turn away a visitor, okay, than they have a right to enter your home. So one of the early Muslims said, for 20 plus years, every time I went to visit someone, I was hoping he would tell me, please go home, this is not a good time for me, or I'm sorry, it's not a good time. Why? Every time he knocked on a door, he just was hoping that someday someone will say, it's not a good time, could you go home? Can you come back another time? I'm sorry. Why? Because he wanted to live out and carry out that verse. You know, that's like the difference between such righteous people and others. Like they actually want to carry out every part of the Quran. They even want to be sent home so he can say, I lived out verse 28 of Surah An-Nūr. These are some of the things that have died over time, and we inshallah we're going to revive them, these teachings that will be revived in this surah, things that you can apply when you visit people, when people visit you, and within your own home. They even has the rules of and etiquettes within the home, what the children should and should not do, and what are the times they can and can't do it. The point of mentioning these two stories is to tell you that what you'll get out of this class will be these refined manners, etiquettes that are applicable at home, you apply at your job, with your friends, and they will inshallah have a noticeable difference. One brother told me that when he opened his trunk, the other brother looked away. He said, I really appreciate the fact that he didn't peer inside my car and try to check out all my belongings. And he actually learned that etiquette from Surah An-Nūr. My goal for you, and what I'm hoping the students will take away after completing this class, is not only taking the practical aspects, especially of good mannerism, so on and so forth, but the bigger understanding of what the Sharia looks like, what the Muslim court looks like. And by having that understanding, they will have the ability to defend the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to defend Islam. If someone at work tells you Islam is barbaric, how can you disprove that? How can you refute that in a very nice way, in a very clear and convincing way, that actually it's not barbaric? Actually, that is not the case. And this is popular in the media, for example, if popular in Hollywood, but we don't have any evidence for that. One thing I've been saying for years, right? I've been saying if you're a Muslim living in modern times, you absolutely have to take this class. Because like I always say, none of us really lived in a Muslim state. We don't know what it's like. We don't know how it feels to be in a Muslim state. If someone tells you it's barbaric, it's violent, you don't know if it's true or not. But now, essentially, we get a chance to go back in time and enter and get the feel of a Muslim state. And now that you know it so well, you're able to explain to people. You're able to defend the religion of Allah. Surah An-Nur is composed of 64 verses. What's the general theme? So for the most part, it's dealing with, illicit sexual behavior, all right? And it starts off by talking about what is the ruling for people who engage in that type of behavior. Then it talks about the marital situation of people who engage in that. Then it talks about what if you slander someone and you don't have proof. Then it goes into the story of Aisha and talks about those who slandered her, and it defends Aisha radiallahu anha. Then it goes into the rules of visitation because it's related to the homes where these kinds of things could take place. Then it goes into lowering the gaze for men, then lowering the gaze for women, and then the hijab for women. Then it talks about the creation of Allah Azza wa Jal, and then powerful verses on the light of guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then it goes into the darkness, and when you see the darkness, the parables of darkness, you really see the light of Allah Azza wa Jal. Then it talks about the hypocrites, because if you go back to the story of Aisha, they started it. So it's befitting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about them. Then it talks about the promise of Allah. And then, even though we covered the rules of visitation, it talks about the etiquettes within the family of knocking on bedroom doors, what time you can knock, what time you can't knock. And then from there, it goes into the hijab rulings for older women who are beyond expecting the expectation of marriage. And then it ends with a beautiful reminder for the believers to obey their Creator. So that's what we're going to be covering in this class. Now, how we cover it is a different story. Now, something you need to understand about tafsir. Sometimes the tafsir focuses on language only. Sometimes the tafsir is fiqh heavy. Sometimes it's aqidah, creed, belief heavy. All right? But what we have here is something interesting. We've got a combination of that. Sometimes, or a lot of times, we go into linguistics, what this word means and how this letter would have changed the meaning. And then we go into a lot of fiqh, especially in the beginning. It's a lot of fiqh heavy material. And then we go into some belief issues towards, the middle and towards the end. So that's the content of what we're going to be learning. Now, how we're going to be doing that learning, one thing you need to understand about tafsir classes, and you also notice this when you're reading tafsir books. Sometimes the author focuses on fiqh. Adwa al-Bayan is an example of that, heavy on the fiqh. Sometimes the book is heavy on aqidah, then issues of belief. Then you have other authors who are known to just focus on linguistics more than anything. And inshallah, what we have done in this class is it's inshallah a fair blend of all. We do a lot of linguistics, we do a lot of aqidah, we do some history as well, we do some seerah as well, and it's fiqh heavy in the beginning. So we've got a combination of all, and it's kind of well balanced. One thing that is not very common in tafsir classes would be exercises. But we've got exercises here. We do a lot of analyses. We look at actually a lot of true stories and court cases so that we can get a better understanding of these verses and how they can be applicable to your life today. By the end of this course, you should be able to demonstrate the proper etiquette in different situations when visiting someone, even when using your cell phone, when getting into someone's car, when someone comes to you in your home. You should be able to defend Islam against attacks that the Sharia is barbaric, or attacks that is unfair to women. And you'll also learn about some sunan that have been abandoned for over 1,000 years. And you will have that blessing and ability to revive those sunan, inshallah. Oh, and one more thing, probably one of the most important things ever. You will know exactly how to behave the next time there's a scandal online or in the Muslim community. My expectation from anyone who is going to take this course is to come in with a clean slate. No preconceived notions of the rulings of women in Islam or about the Sharia, nothing from Hollywood or other ideas. Come in with a clean slate and just listen to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to say and the teachings of His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. What's the yardstick with which you can measure your growth and how much you learned in this class? What if you take a piece of paper right now and then write down all the issues that confuse you concerning the ruling regarding zina of the married man or woman, the ruling concerning slander, the Sharia laws regarding women in particular, and make a list of all the issues you're not clear about, the court proceedings that you're not clear about. And then when this class is over, open it up and see how many of them you can answer. Inshallah, I am hopeful that by the end of the class, you would have a good understanding of the majority, if not everything, on your list. And in addition to that, you should also be able to address these misconceptions when asked about them by someone else. The sources for this class, obviously, the Quran, the Book of Allah. Then not one or two different books of tafsir, but a whole number of them. Realistically, the total number of sources I use for this class are about 19. And that's why you get a very balanced tafsir. Some tafsir books focus on linguistics, I use those books. Some focus on aqidah, I use those. Some focus on fiqh. Then we go into the books of hadith that cover a lot of the material that's covered in this class. Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawood. And I mention them as we go throughout the class. And then not only that, but commentary from contemporary scholars and their commentary on the Tafsīr of Surah An-Nūr. Their little gems and observations, I've gathered a whole bunch of them from over the years, listening to almost every lecture out there. And so you're going to get the best of all the worlds, inshallah, in one class. I have a policy, and that is I never continue doing something if I don't really believe there's great benefit that comes out of it. How do I know that a lot of people have benefited immensely from confidential Tafsīr of Surah An-Nūr? Because I've been teaching it for probably over 6 or 7 years, and I've received tons and tons of feedback from people who come up to me, happy, satisfied, relieved. Oh, I thought the Sharia was XYZ, and now I'm so relieved to understand how it really works. I thought this law was unfair to women, and now you've made it so clear to me. I've received so much feedback like that over the years that I can say with confidence, you will be benefiting, inshallah, and the material is beneficial. So as a recap, what are we going to be learning in Tafsīr Surah An-Nūr? We're going to cover all the verses, 64 verses of the surah, starting off with the ruling for zina. Then we look at the rulings for slander, the verses of ifk, the accusation against Aisha radiallahu anha, guidelines on how to deal with a scandal when there's a scandal in town. Then the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning His creation, then mentioning His light of guidance, then giving parables of darkness, then talking and dealing with the hypocrites and how to deal with the hypocrites, the rules of visitation, lowering the gaze, hijab. And how are we going to do that? We're going to look at it through tafsir, linguistically. We're going to look at fiqh. We're going to look at aqidah. We're going to go into history. All so that you can have an understanding, one, a feel of what the Muslim court and the Muslim state looks like, how merciful it is, and most important of all, to have an understanding of what Allah is saying. We are learning a surah of the Quran from the book of Allah. And the icing on the cake, you understand, you demonstrate better etiquette, how to behave in different situations when visiting someone, when having and receiving a visitor, when lowering your gaze, when there's a scandal. All that practical application you'll get with Tafsīr Surah An-Nūr.